Hi, I'm Emily Rooney, and here, surrounded by images of the University of Chicago, Milton's intellectual home, we'll engage four distinguished guests in a discussion of the relevance of Friedman's ideas today.
From Victorian novelists to modern reformers, a favorite device to stir our emotions is to contrast extremes of wealth and of poverty. We are expected to conclude that the rich are responsible for the deprivations of the poor, that they are rich at the expense of the poor. Whether it is in the slums of New Delhi or in the affluence of Las Vegas, it simply isn't fair that there should be any losers. Life is unfair. There's nothing fair about one man being born blind and another man being born with sight. There's nothing fair about one man being born of a wealthy parent and one of an impecunious parent. What kind of a world would it be if everybody was an absolute identical duplicate of anybody else? You might as well destroy the whole world and just keep one specimen left for a museum. In the same way, it's unfair that Muhammad Ali should be a great fighter and should be able to earn millions. But would it not be even more unfair to the people who like to watch him if you said that in the pursuit of some abstract ideal of equality, we're not going to let Muhammad Ali get more for one night's fight than the lowest man on the totem pole can get for a day's unskilled work on the docks? You could do that, but the result of that would be to deny people the opportunity to watch Muhammad Ali. I doubt very much that he would be willing to subject himself to the kind of fights he's gone through if he were to get the pay of an unskilled docker.
Matthew, Milton Friedman is saying that inequality is a fact of life. Deal with it. You agree?
Sure, I think there's always going to be some inequality in life. But, you know, there's an option between do nothing regarding Muhammad Ali and prevent him from fighting, and it's the system that we have now, which is where you have an income tax and people pay it, and even after taxes, many people are much richer than other people, but it allows us to get some revenue, to fund some programs, to take care of some problems, to create the infrastructure of society that we have, and to express some concern with the level of inequality, and to try to make a society where we have prosperity for everyone and where we have broadly shared economic growth. I think that's common sense, and it's gone sort of a little bit missing in that dialogue.
I think that what we need to do, we need to pay more attention to the rules of the game. That is, what creates some of the inequality that we see. That is, for example, in New York City, the price to get a license to own and operate one taxi is $603,000. In Chicago, I believe it's something like close to $200,000, and many, many restrictions for people at the bottom of the economic ladder to get their feet on the bottom rungs of the economic ladder. Those are the kind of things that we should look at. What are the rules of the game, and how can we change the rules of the game to produce?
Control that too?
No, it does. It's government. It's government. That is people who are on the inside. Let's say the incumbent. Use the example of taxis in New York. The people who own these licenses, they're able to rig the economic game against the outsiders. That is, the insiders want to keep the outsiders out so the insiders can charge higher prices and earn more income. And those are some of the systemic issues that we need to look at.
Just to pick up on Walter's point over here, Milton Friedman was making an extremely important point. The point that he was making was, how do you create the incentives in society to get the maximum possible wealth generated so that everybody can be better off? Now, if it's all very good to say, well, we can just sort of redistribute an X amount of wealth and, still everybody will be prosperous. But people don't become prosperous through redistribution. People become prosperous through creation of wealth. The minute you take away Muhammad Ali's incentive to go and fight and makes $7 or $8 million or however much he makes, you take away the incentive of the producers to keep generating that wealth. That's what Milton Friedman is talking about over here. And so Walter is making an extremely important point. What we need to do is look at the regulations and the disincentives for wealth creation that keep people on the lower rungs of society at those rungs and deal with those rather than redistributing wealth.
Well, these are good points, but let's remember that the people who are benefiting from the high prices for taxi cab licenses isn't the government. It's the entrepreneurs and the capitalists who run the taxi cab companies.
But they're able to use
but
So we're going to infringe on their freedom?
But they use the
point is that
government
the government has to figure out how to arrange this so that there's as much opportunity for as many people as possible. There's a role for the government in regulating things and setting fair rules within a fairly open capitalist system. And maybe they haven't drawn the line in the right places here, but I don't think that's an argument against the role of government.
Milton Friedman also supported a negative income tax. He was thinking that would be in exchange for programs like welfare or food stamps and that kind of thing. But it's essentially the same thing. Do you think that's a contradiction to be in favor of a negative, I'm going to ask you that, John, a negative income tax, which basically says at a certain point you stop paying in and you get more back?
Well, I think it needs to be all more on a practical level, right? If that produced enough revenue to run the important functions of government, then I suppose it's as good as anything else, depending on the give and take.
We had it though.
But the point is, you need revenue to do the important functions of government. The argument today, my life is spent in the actual give and take of trying to argue these things in public policy debates, and not in the relatively clean academic arena where you can argue ideals and extreme
I guess
positions.
my question is, was this a contradiction in ideology? Because basically it's a social welfare program by any other name. We have it now with earned income.
Well, just to
tax
bring a little
credits.
context over here, the reason Milton Friedman, advocated the earned income tax credit scheme, which is I think what you're talking about, was that he felt if there was going to be a welfare state, that was the most efficient way to arrange it, where the money that needed to go to the recipients of welfare would go directly to them.
That's given that you're going to have a welfare
That's
state.
given but he didn't advocate a welfare state. So that's a very important difference to keep in mind. Going back to John's point over here, I just hear you guys slipping between two things. It's one thing to tax people in order to function vital functions of the state, which are equally used by all. It is quite another thing to tax rich people, to give that money to a certain subset of people, whether they are the poor or the talented or the untalented. Those are two very different things. And that's the latter that Milton Friedman was opposed to.
We hear here Muhammad Ali, he's so great. Wouldn't it be terrible if someone stopped him from boxing? And I agree, that would be terrible. Muhammad Ali was great fighter, great career. But of course, he was paying income taxes, very high income tax rates, as I recall, back when he was boxing. I mean, you were talking as if that would just destroy it, and there would be no athletes, there would be no businessmen.
You and I can sit and debate what is the optimal level of taxation after which a tax becomes a disincentive to the producer. But there is such a point. There is such a point. We have to agree. And so the point is that if you are a central planner and your infinite wisdom, you know exactly where that optimal point is. It's a different thing. I don't believe that kind of knowledge is possible.
This is what I'm saying about the switching, though.
I would much rather leave as much money as
getting back to the idea of
possible
inequality
to people to use as they choose fit.
Let me ask Walter, at what point does inequality, income inequality, create just a huge social and political problem? There's so much resentment on the bottom. What is the government's role then to help mesh that, to help
I don't believe that government has a role whatsoever in doing in getting rid of inequality. See, the point that you have to recognize is that there's no tooth fairy or Santa Claus giving the congressman the money. So the only way the government can give one American citizen $1 is through intimidation, threats, and coercion, confiscate that dollar from some other American. Now, you should not confuse my disagreeing with the redistribution with my saying, well, you shouldn't take care of people who are in need. I believe in helping your fellow man by reaching into your own pockets to help your fellow man is praiseworthy and laudable. Reaching into somebody else's pockets to help your fellow man in need is despicable. And for the Christians among us, when God gave Moses the commandment, thou shalt not steal, he did not mean thou shalt not steal unless you got a majority vote in Congress.